Hi friends, how's it going? It is Monday around 1 and I'm so excited to continue on with our story. We're going to jump right into chapter 87. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get ourselves started. We're starting with Luke. I visited the hospital several times, but never once had I gone to the waiting room. Not until I sat in there with my class on brain surgery day. Sat for hours. The room had a nice layout. The architects had found a way to maximize, dollar word, the area while keeping a large perimeter. The room represented a rectangle with little sections of the wall jutting into the interior here and there. This created corners and smaller spaces within the larger room. I figured this was important because people wanted privacy. At least, that is how I felt when I waited. Danielle. We sat together in the waiting room. I sat next to my mother. We left Grandma home, not knowing how she would handle being in the company of Terry and Anna. Anna sat across from us, next to her mother. A large wooden coffee table rested in the middle of everyone. It reminded me of our class meetings. We didn't form a circle on the floor, and we didn't have the microphone, but it was close enough. Except no one talked. Mr. Terupt always started our meetings, so we sat silent until Anna spoke up. Thank goodness. But after Luke answered her questions, no one else talked. At least not until Jeffrey surprised us. He put our class microphone in the middle of the big wooden table. I stared at it. Then I looked at Jeffrey. How did he know to bring it? Just a hunch, he said. I noticed that he and Jessica were looking at each other. I reached down and took the microphone. Remember the first time Mr. Terupt brought this out, I said? I passed the microphone to Lexi. I was like, Teach is a weirdo, she said. But it turned out to be pretty cool. Sort of like the grass thing. 77,537,412, Luke reminded us. That grass project was awesome. The microphone moved around our square and we shared different stories and memories. It was perfect. Then, a doctor came into the waiting room. Jessica. Act 11, Scene 2. Enter a man wearing lime green scrubs and a matching hospital cap. The thought that clinches in your brain, in your head, like a shower cap. I saw him that moment that he came through the door. Was he coming for us? It was too soon, wasn't it? Had something gone wrong with Mr. Terupt's surgery? I stiffened. Then I noticed Jeffrey, and he was practically hyperventilating. This place, especially the sight of doctors, triggered such horrible memories for him. I wrapped my arm around him and whispered, It's okay. Just breathe. My mom also helped comfort him too. She sat on the other side of Jeffrey and hugged him too. Mom knew his story. I had told her, but others stared at him, wondering why he was so worked up. The doctor didn't come over to us, and Jeffrey calmed down. Instead, doctor made his way over to the knitting lady. I saw him take a deep breath as he got closer to her, and I wondered if those were one of the big breaths you take in order to deliver really bad news. He pulled a chair next to the knitting lady and sat down across from her. Once she realized he was there, her hands and yarn and needles all stopped working and rested in her lap. Her eyes looked into the doctor's face. His lips never moved, but he shook his head from side to side, and his face expressed sorrow. The knitting lady's strong chin dropped. The yarn and needles fell to the ground, and her hands covered her face. She began to shake silently with lonesome tears. The doctor placed a hand on her back and said, I'm very sorry. He waited for a while, then rose and walked out of the room. I felt silent tears trickling down my cheeks. I looked at my friends and saw some of them with tears too. I was scared, but I wasn't alone. Jeffrey. Hard to breathe. So many bad memories. Bad news everywhere. I saw the doc walk in. I couldn't catch my breath. Jessica noticed. She and her mom wrapped their arms around me and helped me calm down. The doc wasn't for us. He handed out his bad news to someone else. I know how that goes. I'm so sorry, the doc had told my family. That was all he had to say. We knew Michael was dead. Danielle. Peter took the microphone. He still wasn't talking. He'd answer you if he asked him something, but he wasn't ignoring, and we weren't ignoring him anymore. But for the most part, he stayed silent. And he never talked about Mr. Terupt or anything to do with the accident. I held my breath along with everyone else. At least, that's what it felt like. I remember the time I said we could invite the collaborative classroom to our holiday centers. I saw Mr. T wipe his eyes after I said that. I didn't know why then. Now I do. Peter put the microphone back down on the table. Oops, there we go. Alexa. I took the mic again after hearing Peter. Like, I knew what he was talking about and understanding stuff that Teach said that he didn't before. That was, like, so true for me, too. Teach took me into the hall and, like, said some stuff that I hated him for. Like, I really hated him. But all he did was tell me the truth. I didn't want to listen. I hated him and I hated the truth. I stopped talking, but I didn't pass the mic yet. I was thinking, I hope Teach wakes up so he can see that I've listened. I added. He helped me, and I'd really like him to know that. I put the microphone back on the table. Peter picked it up again. Peter. I decided to pick up the microphone again and say one more thing. Maybe talking at Mr. T and sharing memories would help him pull through the surgery. Brain surgery. I couldn't believe he had to have brain surgery, all because of me. Because of the snowball I threw. My thoughts always came back to this. I remember the time I flung the frisbee. Mr. T said a few things to me, but that was it. I remember the puddle on the floor. He said a few things, but that was it. Nothing bad ever happens, I thought. I chucked that snowball. No matter what any of you say, it's all my fault. It always will be. I stopped talking so I could fight back my tears, but I didn't put down the microphone. I wasn't done yet. I'm sorry, I said, and I looked around at everyone. I'm sorry you're here because of me. I let the microphone roll back onto the table. No one had time to respond because another doctor walked in, and this time, he was our man. Jessica, Act 11, Scene 3. The door to the waiting room pushed open and another doctor walked in. Same lime green scrubs and matching cap. This doctor also wore a mask tied around his face. Jeffrey started hyperventilating again. Mom and I calmed him. We held hands on Jeffrey's lap. I squeezed Mom's hands and she squeezed back. Was this it? The doctor reached behind his head and untied his mask. He was our guy. I saw him take that deep breath as he walked towards us. Luke. I saw Dr. Wilkins approach us. My heart took off like a car that had its gas pedal mashed to the floor. Please, please, please have good news. I repeated over and over again in my head. Mom squeezed my shoulder. Dr. Wilkins found a chair and sat with us. Good news, gang, he said. Mr. Terupt made it through the surgery. Our faces broke into mini smiles and we let out breaths of relief. I gave Mom a little hug. We were able to stop the bleeding, but your teacher remains in a coma, Dr. Wilkins continued. Why? Anna said. I thought that if you stopped the bleeding, he'd wake up. Her voice rose and shook a little. Isn't that what's supposed to happen? Anna spoke for all of us, but instead of Dr. Wilkins answering, Jeffrey did. Now it's wait and see, Jeffrey said. He took a deep breath in and let it out slow. That the bleeding is stopped is a good sign. Deep breath. But it doesn't guarantee that Terupt will wake up. We have to wait and see. More deep, slow breathing. Why was he so anxious? His difficulties made me realize that he hadn't visited the hospital, but always seemed interested in my report. What was Jeffrey's deal? That's right. We wait and see and keep hoping, Dr. Wilkins said. Can we see him? Peter asked. Not today, Peter. Mr. Terupt is in post-surgical room being watched very carefully. Why does he need to be watched carefully? Anna asked, her voice barely a whisper. I thought he would be okay now. We monitor every patient closely after major surgery. It's normal, Dr. Wilkins promised. Mr. Terupt is doing well at this point. We sat there looking at him like a team that had just lost the big game. Hey guys, don't give up now, Dr. Wilkins said. This is when your teacher needs you the most. This is good news today. And then Anna came through in the clutch. She took the lead and said what we all needed to hear. He's going to make it. Trust me on this one. Be positive. Mr. Terupt told me that once, and he was right. Jeffrey. It was wait and see for Michael, too. He didn't make it. That was when Mom and Dad's lives suddenly crashed down in different paths. I don't know if their paths will ever come together again, but it's okay to hope. I hope Terupt makes it. I'm trying hard to believe, Anna. Jessica. Act 11, Scene 4. That was it. Wait and see. It feels so anticlimactic to sit all day expecting an outcome only to find that it was time to go home and wait some more. People trickled out of the waiting room at different times. Some of the adults left first, probably because they're more accustomed to being patient. Miss Kelsey and Miss Warner left, then some of my classmates. Only a few people were still sitting, Anna and Terry, and Danielle and her mother. When Mom and I rallied ourselves to leave, Lexi and Jeffrey came with us. We were their ride home. Wait and see. Anna. The waiting room slowly emptied. Next thing I knew, my mom and I were sitting directly across from Danielle and her mom, with hardly anyone else around. I felt uneasy knowing her mother hated us, but I took a chance. Danielle, can we pray with you? I asked. Danielle didn't hesitate 1 second. Sure, she said. We bowed our heads and Danielle led us in a prayer for Mr. Terupt. It was a beautiful prayer, and afterwards I thought her mother's eyes looked differently upon me. Mom and I left after that, leaving Danielle and her mother, Luke and his mother, Peter, Mrs. Williams, and Miss Newberry. How close were Mr. Terupt and Miss Newberry, both without wedding rings? I didn't know, but my heart suddenly hurt for the teacher from across the hall. She was definitely hoping to have him back. You didn't even need to be good at noticing things to see that. So many of us need you, Mr. Terupt. Keep fighting. Danielle. Can we pray with you? Anna asked. I felt alarm rush through my mom's body. How could these sinners want to pray with us? Mom must have wondered. Sure, I said. Dear God, we're down here playing a wait-and-see game now. It would be great if you could keep the waiting part short and give us back Mr. Terupt. There are lots of people hoping he wakes up. Please give us the strength to keep hoping and believing as we go on waiting. And God, I whispered this last part because Peter was sitting near us. I'd also like you to give extra comfort to Peter and Jeffrey too, though I'm not sure what's up with him. Amen. Anna's smart. She wants our families to get along, so she asked us to pray together, knowing that God is the most important thing to my family. I know my mom can't think Terry's all bad if she's praying with us, and Anna is as nice and sweet as she is. At least, I hope that's true. I've been asking God to help me get my family to see that Terry and Anna are good people. Jessica. Act 11, Scene 5. We dropped Lexi off at first, then Jeffrey. I sat in the front passenger seat and Jeffrey sat in the back. Before he got out, I asked him, You okay, Jeffrey? Yeah, I'm okay, he said. Thanks for helping me in there. Thank you, Mrs. Reitman. You're welcome, we said together. I'm sure everybody's wondering what's up with me, he said. Don't worry. Your secret is still safe, I said. Jeffrey opened the back door and he didn't get out right away. There's something I've been meaning to tell you, Jess. What happened to Terupt isn't your fault. You need to stop thinking that it is. Jeffrey's words startled me. I did feel guilty. I roped Danielle and Anna into my wicked plan, which led to Peter's devastating snowball. Then why did it happen, Jeffrey? I said. I told you things happen for a reason. I still don't know mine. Neither do I, he said. But not knowing the reason doesn't make it your fault. We sat quietly. Mom didn't say anything. I stared down at my hands. They longed for a book to hold. I fidgeted my nails and cuticles instead. Then Jeffrey spoke again. I know one thing, Jess. He's called me Jess twice now. You've helped me. I haven't had someone to talk to in a long time. Thanks. He climbed out of the car and shut the door. Before driving away, we saw Jeffrey's mom standing at the front door to the house waiting for him, and she wasn't wearing pajamas. They hugged. Mom and I had tears in our eyes as we drove away. More of Mr. Terupt at work. I just knew it. We hadn't driven very far before Mom broke the silence. Jessica, I need to tell you something that even adults have a hard time understanding, but I need you to try, okay? I nodded, and I sat up straight in my seat to readjust the seatbelt. I know you've been wrestling with the issue of who's at fault for Mr. Terupt's accident, as have many of your classmates. Poor Peter's really struggling, and I'm afraid the only one that might be able to help him is Mr. Terupt. Mom slowed at the stop sign and looked both ways. So whose fault is it? I asked, my voice rising. Emotion can do that to you. Mom just went with the flow. She turned the car left and stepped on the accelerator. Mr. Terupt's, she said. I looked out the window. I didn't want to hear it. Look, Jessica, you don't have to agree with me, and not everyone will, but you do need to hear me out. Let me explain. Slowly, reluctantly, I looked at her. I didn't want her to be right. Thank you, she said. I told you it wasn't going to be easy. We slowed at a red light. All those instances with Peter earlier on this year and with Luke's plant concoction and all the other mischief. Mom paused. I think Mr. Terupt handled them the way that he did because he was trying to teach you guys some personal responsibility. The light turned and Mom pushed the gas. But that's what cost it in the end. He let you play rough that day in the snow and hoped you wouldn't cross the line. But he made it your responsibility not to cross the line because he didn't intervene. But how was that bad? Isn't that one of the reasons he was so special, because he gave us those chances? Don't use the past tense, honey. He is special. Fine, I said, annoyed, but glad to talk about him in the present. But isn't it? I was annoyed because I didn't want the conversation slowed. I wanted answers. I cracked my window, suddenly hot. I let the wind hit me in the face. It is indeed one of the reasons he's special, but in the end, you're still just kids, and asking you to assume that much responsibility isn't fair. You can't be expected to handle it all the time. So that's why it's his fault. Mom spoke so calmly. I knew she was trying to keep me from getting too upset. It's his fault for asking us to act like adults when we're just kids? I started restating Mom's argument. Whereas if he had taken the responsibility out of our hands by making us stop playing rough, then there probably would have never even been a snowball thrown. I looked at Mom. That's exactly right, she said. Well, I think that makes as much sense as Dad and his airheaded bimbo. Our car swerved. Mom was in shock. We hadn't spoken about Dad in a while, but he and his stupid girlfriend boiled to the surface of my upset feelings. Plus, I have a strong vocabulary and could have probably selected a nicer word for her, though I doubt I could have chosen a more accurate one. So now if Mr. Terupt gets better, he's going to get in trouble. Is that right too? Not necessarily, Mom said. And watch your language. Besides, to say airhead and bimbo is a bit redundant, though I'll agree, the new woman in your dad's life is a real floozy. The car slowed. Mom pulled into our driveway. She put the car in park and turned it off. I undid my seatbelt. Jessica, I've spoken to Mrs. Williams and to some of the other parents at school, and on several different occasions. We've been talking because we're worried about how you are all dealing with this. Nobody wants to see Mr. Terupt get into trouble, including Mrs. Williams and the school. Everybody knows he's a great teacher. We all just want him to get better. Mom leaned over and gave me a hug. I hugged her back. You know, Terry told me the other day that Anna asked her if their situation is her fault. Anna's fault, I said. Of course it isn't. Exactly, Mom said. And I hope you know what happened between your father and me is not at all your fault either. I needed to hear that. I hugged her again, but I didn't say anything, because talking would have made me cry. And Mom was quiet too, I think for the same reason. Quiet love filled our car. And that's where we're going to pause, friends. We finished the month of May, which means when we continue on, we're going to continue with June. And we just might finish our book together today. I love you all. I miss you so much. And I can't wait to continue on. We've got good news about Mr. Terupt, but we're going to keep waiting to see. Continue on having a lovely day. I hope you're staying warm on this kind of dreary Monday we've got. And I'll check in with you guys soon. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Check in later, and I think we'll finish up our book. Can't wait. Bye, guys.